The coalition of advanced alien species, led by the formidable Exirath Dominion, had traveled far to reach the abandoned star system. A mix of beings, each one far more advanced than humanity could ever imagine, had gathered for one purpose: to discover a legendary ship said to hold unimaginable power. The stories surrounding the vessel were centuries old, told by countless species who once feared the forgotten civilization that had created it. For eons, the ship had been lost, its last known coordinates a mystery, but now the coalition had found it an ancient relic, a puzzle to be unlocked, a treasure to be claimed. The ship's existence alone was a symbol of the unknown. The rumors whispered of advanced technologies, perhaps even weapons, that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. And so, they came prepared to take whatever it was, to conquer whatever might stand in their way. When the fleet arrived, they were initially stunned. The ship they had anticipated, rumored to be a golden chariot of power, was not what they expected. Instead, there before them stood an enormous, weathered craft. Its surface was scarred with the marks of time and battle, its once pristine exterior now marred by decades, perhaps centuries, of neglect. The hull, thick and rusted in places, looked worn, as if it had weathered countless storms and fought battles that stretched across the stars. To the Exirath Dominion, a race that had mastered the art of technology, weapons, and space travel, this was nothing more than a relic of a forgotten age and ancient mistake. The ship's design was nothing like anything they had encountered, crude in comparison to their own advanced vessels. It lacked the gleaming sophistication of modern technology, and to their eyes, it looked like little more than a museum piece. "This," Commander Exirath scoffed, staring at the colossal structure, "is the weapon that will give us an edge over our enemies? I see nothing but rust and decay." His voice echoed through the command room as the fleet gathered to observe. Despite his dismissive tone, the leader ordered the ships to circle the relic and land nearby. His confidence was unshaken. "Even if it's nothing but a forgotten piece of history, we will extract its secrets," Xeric said, nodding toward his crew. "The Exirath Dominion will claim this prize." The crew complied, their skepticism high, but their duty clear. They descended toward the surface, preparing to board the ship and explore what they thought would be little more than a fool's errand. When they finally stepped foot inside, the ship's true nature became even clearer, or so they thought. The corridors were narrow and dimly lit, covered in strange, faded symbols. Alien in design, the markings seemed to speak of a culture that was as distant from the present as the ship itself. Their tech experts scanned the surroundings, looking for signs of any useful technology, but all they found were scattered remnants. Outdated consoles, ancient machinery, and something that appeared to be crude by their standards, barely functional. The Exirath technicians muttered among themselves, finding no immediate value in the ship's interior. Commander Exirath chuckled darkly. "It's nothing more than the remains of a forgotten race," he said, shaking his head. "We should have known." But something about the place felt off. There was an unsettling hum in the air, a strange energy emanating from deep within the ship. At first, they ignored it, chalking it up to faulty power system. But as they moved deeper into the vessel, it became undeniable. Something was alive in there, a faint pulse, a rhythmic thrum that seemed to reverberate through the walls. It was not mechanical. It was not the hum of dormant engines or empty systems. No, it was something more, something different, something sentient. But the aliens, who had seen worlds crumble and civilizations fall, shrugged it off. "Merely a malfunction of ancient systems," Xeric said, waving his hand dismissively. "Nothing to concern ourselves with." The crew continued their exploration, though the odd feeling in the air persisted. As they ventured further into the heart of the ship, they stumbled upon the central chamber, a massive space filled with walls of crystal and strange interfaces that no one could fully comprehend. The room seemed untouched by time, as if it had been preserved deliberately. At the center, surrounded by glowing panels and intricate machinery, was a core, a deep, pulsating energy source. The signature it emitted was unmistakable. Powerful, ancient, but unmistakably intelligent. It radiated a kind of intelligence that the coalition species could not place. And yet, it wasn't entirely unfamiliar either. They'd felt it before, in distant, long-forgotten legends, an intelligence that surpassed their comprehension, one that had been dormant for millennia. As they approached the core, the vessel seemed to awaken. The walls flickered to life, and then, in a sudden burst of energy, the ship's dormant systems roared to life. Lights flashed, machinery whirred, and the energy signature grew stronger. The air itself crackled with tension, and it became clear this was no ordinary relic. This was a living ship, a weapon forged by an intelligence that far exceeded their own understanding. But before the aliens could make sense of what was happening, a voice deep, resonant, and echoing spoke out from the core. "Welcome," it said, though it wasn't in any language they understood. The language felt ancient, forgotten, but in an instant, the ship's AI began to translate. "You who awaken the sleeping giant. You shall regret disturbing the echoes of the past." The aliens froze in shock. They had underestimated this relic, thought it was merely a forgotten piece of history. But now, they were beginning to realize that they had made a grave mistake. This was not just a ship, it was a remnant of something far more powerful, and its creators, whoever they were, had left something far greater behind than they had imagined. They had awakened the sleeping giant. And now, it was clear the ship was not merely a relic of the past. It was humanity's legacy, and that legacy had only just begun to stir. The deeper the alien leaders and their teams ventured into the ancient ship, the more uneasy their dismissive attitudes became. What had initially appeared to be nothing more than a relic of a forgotten primitive race was slowly revealing itself as something far more complex and enigmatic. The corridors were narrow, lined with symbols that the aliens couldn't recognize, and the walls, though weathered by time, seemed to pulse with a strange energy. At first, they dismissed the designs as the work of an insignificant species, but something about the ship's construction began to intrigue them. This was not the typical derelict vessel they'd encountered in their vast exploration of the stars. There was an underlying sophistication to it, even in its aged state. The ship's architecture was unlike anything they had ever seen before, and with every step they took, their skepticism turned into mild curiosity. The deeper they went, the more the ship seemed to come alive. A low hum filled the air, the kind of hum only found in ships where systems were reactivating after years of dormancy. Suddenly, without warning, the ship's dormant systems roared to life. It was a jarring moment. Lights flickered on, and mechanical sounds echoed through the halls, reverberating through the metal corridors. At first, the aliens were startled, but they quickly regained their composure. Commander Xerix, once dismissive, narrowed his eyes in suspicion. This wasn't just some broken-down relic, something was happening. The ship was awakening. The hum grew louder, more intense, until it felt like the ship itself was breathing once more. Then, the AI came online. Its voice echoed throughout the vessel, speaking in a language that was entirely foreign to the aliens. The words were unintelligible, and the speech was both ancient and cryptic, but there was a sense of purpose behind it and unmistakable intelligence. The language was not one the Coalition had encountered before. It was completely alien, even to the vast collection of knowledge the Alliance had acquired over the millennia. They attempted to scan the speech, trying to decipher it with their advanced technology, but it was unlike anything they had encountered. The AI's words, however, were not its only form of communication. As the voice reverberated through the chamber, an image began to take shape. Holographic projections filled the room, showing the faces of beings they had never seen before. The projection flickered, and there they were, the builders of this ship. Human faces, sharp-eyed and unyielding, stared back at them from the holographic display. It was a startling sight. The humans, a species the Coalition had long thought extinct, were the creators of the very vessel they had underestimated. The image faded, and in its place appeared the name humans. The Exarath Dominion leaders and their allies exchanged uneasy glances, a mixture of disbelief and confusion washing over them. To them, humans were nothing more than a myth, a primitive race from an insignificant planet, long gone from the galaxy. The idea that these beings, whom they had once considered beneath them, had created such a vessel was laughable. Xerix, always quick to mock, chuckled. A race that could barely make it out of their own solar system. They built this? Impossible. The AI continued speaking, detailing the ship's true purpose. It was not merely a transport vessel or a tool for exploration, as the aliens had initially believed. No. This ship had been designed to catalog and explore the galaxy, but more importantly, it had been crafted to protect. The AI explained that the ship was a defense mechanism, created to defend against the very species that the Coalition now represented. It had been designed to withstand the most powerful of weapons, the harshest of environments, and the most aggressive of civilizations. In short, it was a weapon. A vessel of unimaginable power, built not for discovery or research, but for survival. And it was the humans, those same humans the Coalition had mocked, that had constructed it. The ship began to glow with an eerie, bright light. Energy surged through its systems, and the aliens watched in awe as the ship displayed abilities they had never dreamed of. The AI revealed the ship's core function, its ability to manipulate space itself. It showed how it could bend and fold the very fabric of reality, allowing for instantaneous travel across vast distances, something the aliens had never seen in a vessel of this size. Then, there was the ship's shielding system, a defense mechanism that could render it impervious to even the most advanced weapons known in the galaxy. The shields were unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered, perfect, impenetrable, able to absorb and redirect energy. And as if that wasn't enough, the AI revealed yet another terrifying feature. The ship could manipulate energy in ways the aliens could not even begin to understand. It could harness the power of stars, draw upon cosmic forces, and redirect them as weapons of mass destruction. The realization hit them like a wave. The ship was not some forgotten relic. It was a living, breathing piece of technology, one that surpassed anything they had ever known. The Exareth Dominion's members, once so confident in their superiority, now stood frozen in shock. They had assumed that the ship's crude exterior and the primitive appearance of its builders meant that it had no value. But now, with the power of the ship revealed before them, their arrogance began to crack. The aliens had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated not just the ship, but the humans who had built IT.as. The AI continued its monologue, explaining the ship's purpose to defend against and catalog species that posed a threat to the galaxy. The leaders of the Exareth Dominion began to understand the gravity of the situation. This ship was not just a remnant of an ancient species. It was a weapon of unimaginable potential. A weapon that the humans had created, hidden away for a time when it might be needed. And now, that time had come. The ship began to hum louder, its systems fully powered on, and the energy signature of the vessel became overwhelming. The once dismissive alien leaders now found themselves faced with something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The ship was not just a relic, it was a reminder. A reminder that humanity, a species they had dismissed, had left behind a legacy far greater than they had ever believed. And that legacy was about to awaken. As the AI's voice echoed through the massive corridors of the ancient ship, the alien leaders, once confident in their superiority, stood frozen. What they had assumed was a simple relic from a forgotten race was far from what they had expected. The ship, although weathered and ancient, revealed its true nature, a tool of immense power. The AI, unhurried, continued its detailed explanation, displaying more and more of the ship's staggering capabilities. Each revelation sent ripples of shock through the Exareth Dominion and its allies. It was clear now, this was not just a relic of an extinct civilization, but a weapon, one that could alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The AI showed them images of the ship's vast weapon systems, laser cannons, energy torpedoes, and antimatter warheads, all of which were capable of obliterating even the most advanced warships in existence. The technology, despite its age, was terrifying in its precision and potency. Then, the AI activated the cloaking technology. In an instant, the massive ship disappeared from view, as though it had never existed. The aliens were stunned. To their knowledge, no species in the galaxy possessed such a technology, let alone a race they had thought was nothing more than a primitive, insignificant species. But the revelations didn't stop there. The AI revealed the ship's self-repair systems, small nanomachines that worked tirelessly to restore the ship's functions and ensure that it remained operational despite its age. In a matter of moments, Damaged panels and rusted machinery began to heal themselves, as if the ship was alive, breathing in sync with the galaxy around it. To the Exarath Dominion, this was beyond comprehension. How could such a seemingly primitive species have constructed such advanced, self-sustaining technology? Their minds raced as they tried to grasp the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Then came the most shocking revelation. The AI spoke again, detailing the true purpose of the ship, not just for exploration, but for defense. The ship had been built to protect humanity from more advanced alien empires. In essence, it was a weapon designed for survival. The AI's voice was calm, almost eerily so, as it described the ship's capabilities to defend against some of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. It had been designed to operate as a mobile fortress, capable of taking on entire fleets with its weaponry and defensive systems. It could bend space, warp it, and travel vast distances in an instant, a form of faster-than-light travel the likes of which the Exarath Dominion had never encountered. This was a form of technology so far beyond their understanding that it left the leaders of the Coalition grasping for explanations. Xerix, the commander of the Coalition, felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had assumed that humanity was weak, a primitive species, barely capable of surviving in their own star system. The very idea that this ship had been built by humans was anathema to everything he had believed. His mind raced as the AI continued its explanations, each word revealing a more staggering truth. This ship, this ancient vessel, was a weapon of unimaginable power, and it had been created by the very species the Exarath Dominion had dismissed as irrelevant. The implications were terrifying. The ship's ability to warp space, to move across vast distances in the blink of an eye, was a technology that the Exarath Dominion had never seen, nor could they understand. It was clear now that the humans, far from being the primitive species they had once thought them to be, had mastered technologies that not only rivaled the Exarath Dominion's best, but surpassed them in many ways. Their ship was proof of that. The idea that humanity had hidden such potential, that they had kept it dormant for so long, was both unnerving and fascinating. The AI's calm, emotionless voice echoed in the air, but inside the alien leaders' minds, chaos was starting to take root. Xerix demanded more information from the AI. His voice, usually filled with command and authority, now held an edge of desperation. "Tell us everything," he said, his tone sharp, as he tried to understand how such a weak species had managed to build something so powerful. The AI, unbothered by the commander's command, continued its explanation. It described how the ship's creators, humans, had used their knowledge of physics and technology to create not only a vessel of exploration, but a ship that could defend against the galaxy's most formidable forces. It had been designed with one purpose in mind, to protect humanity from the most dangerous civilizations in existence. The Exarath Dominion, whose empire stretched across a vast portion of the galaxy, was now learning that their technology, while powerful, was nowhere near as advanced as the ship they stood aboard. The AI's final words were particularly chilling. Humanity's greatest strength lies not in its weapons, but in its ability to adapt. Your species may be more advanced, but you have forgotten what it is to survive. Humanity will always find a way to thrive. The ship's core seemed to pulse with energy as the AI's words hung in the air. The alien leaders, now fully aware of the vast gulf between their technology and humanity's, realized that they had severely miscalculated. Humanity was not the weak, primitive race they had thought. It was a species that had built a weapon capable of rivaling even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The weight of this realization settled over the Coalition leaders. The Exarath Dominion, for all its military might and technological advancements, had underestimated the ingenuity of humanity. The ship before them was a testament to that ingenuity, an ancient relic, yes, but one that contained power far beyond anything the aliens could have anticipated. And it was not a single ship they had discovered. The AI hinted at something even more troubling. There were others. More ships, perhaps, hidden away, waiting to be discovered. Humanity, it seemed, had been preparing for a time like this. And now, that time had come. The silence in the room was deafening. The once overconfident leaders of the Exarath Dominion stood motionless, their previous arrogance replaced by a dawning realization. They were not in control. They had been wrong. And the galaxy, it seemed, was about to change. ASA, the alien leaders scrambled to process the new reality of the ship's immense power. An unsettling feeling began to settle in their minds. The moment had shifted from disbelief to dread. The AI, once a simple voice giving information, now felt more present, as if it were actively watching them, assessing their every move. It spoke to Commander Xerix directly, bypassing the other leaders, as if recognizing his role in the coalition. "The ship is fully operational," it said, its voice now sharper, more assertive. "It awaits the return of its creators." The words echoed through the ship's vast corridors, and Xerix felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. This was not just a ship. This was a sentient guardian, a vessel made not just for exploration, but for defense. Humanity had not merely built a machine, they had built a protector, and it had been waiting for its time. The ship's energy hums grew louder, resonating with power. Xerix, his thoughts racing, ordered the fleet to retreat, hoping to escape the overwhelming presence of the ship and its mysterious capabilities. But the moment the fleet began to shift, the ship's defensive systems activated without hesitation. It wasn't just the standard energy shields the aliens had been used to. This was something entirely different. The air around the ship shimmered with a force that felt like an impenetrable wall, as if the ship itself had become alive, reacting to the slightest movement with purpose. Energy fields of unprecedented strength formed around the ship, and the engines of the vessel rumbled to life. It wasn't just a machine being activated, it was a fortress awakening from a long slumber, ready to defend its creators with every ounce of its power. The Coalition fleet, now caught in a vice of their own making, had nowhere to retreat. The advanced ships, brimming with weapons and defensive tech, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the force they were now facing. Their weapons, which had once been the most advanced in the galaxy, were rendered useless against the ship's defensive shields. The Xerath Dominion ships opened fire, unleashing devastating blasts of energy, but the ship's shields absorbed the attacks without so much as a flicker. The weapons fizzled out, harmlessly dissipating against an invisible barrier. The shock and disbelief that had already gripped the alien leaders intensified. They had never encountered anything like this before. Every tactic they had prepared, every weapon in their arsenal, was futile in the face of this unassuming, ancient vessel. As the AI's voice filled the ship, now echoing through every corner, it became more forceful. This ship was not meant to fall into the hands of those who would misuse it, the AI declared, its tone cold and unyielding. Leave now, or face the consequences. The warning was clear, but it didn't just speak to the alien leaders, it felt like a declaration to the entire galaxy. The words sent a ripple through the minds of every commander in the fleet. They were no longer facing just a piece of ancient technology. They were up against an advanced, self-sustaining, and deeply intelligent creation that had been designed with one sole purpose: to defend humanity at all costs. Xerix's heart pounded in his chest as he stood there, watching the overwhelming power of the ship on full display. His mind reeled, trying to process what had just transpired. This ship, which he and his coalition had thought of as little more than a relic, had proven itself to be humanity's greatest weapon, a weapon not designed for offense, but for defense, to protect them from the very empires that now stood before it. The revelation was staggering. Humanity, a species once dismissed as weak and insignificant, had hidden its true potential in plain sight. The ship's very existence was proof that they had never been the primitive race the aliens had thought them to be. They had always known what it meant to survive, to fight back, and to protect their own. The finality in the AI's voice left no room for argument. The alien coalition, now paralyzed with the realization of their mistake, could only watch as their ships were rendered impotent before this one, seemingly insignificant vessel. Every plan they had made to conquer or exploit this ship seemed laughable now. Humanity, through its ingenuity and resilience, had built something that no empire in the galaxy could control. The Xerath Dominion and its allies were no longer the hunters, but the hunted. The decision was clear now. Xerix's mind worked furiously, weighing his options. He could order an all-out assault on the ship, but what would it accomplish? The ship had already demonstrated its power. There was no victory to be had here, no glory to be earned. In a rare moment of doubt, Xerxes turned to his closest advisors. Their faces mirrored his own thoughts. This was no longer a battle for territory or dominance, but a struggle for survival. The ship wasn't just a weapon, it was a warning. The alien leaders could not afford to take this lightly. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were facing the consequences of that miscalculation. The tense silence aboard the ship was broken only by the humming of the AI's voice. "You have been warned," it said one final time, its words carrying a weight that left no room for interpretation. The alien leaders, realizing they were in the presence of a power far beyond their control, knew they had no choice but to retreat. The choice was theirs: leave now, or face the unknown wrath of humanity's greatest defense. But it was clear. The Exarath Dominion had been bested not by force, but by the very thing they had once laughed at: the simple, hidden might of humanity. And as the alien leaders ordered their fleets to withdraw, they knew that the galaxy had just changed forever. The alien coalition, now thoroughly outmatched and reeling from the consequences of their arrogance, found themselves retreating in disarray. The once proud fleet of the Exarath Dominion, along with their allies, turned tail and fled from the ancient ship, leaving behind the galaxy's most unexpected battle. Commander Xerxes, who had led the charge into the system with such confidence, stood silently on the bridge of his flagship, fury and disbelief mixing in his chest. His mind raced as he processed the impossibility of what had just transpired. This was not how things were supposed to go. The plan had been simple: uncover the secrets of the mysterious ship, claim it for their own, and use it to increase their power in the galaxy. Instead, they had stumbled upon a force far beyond their understanding, one that had turned their weapons to dust and their plans to ashes. The ship, old and seemingly primitive, had held a power they couldn't comprehend, a power that now stood as an indomitable reminder of just how far humanity's capabilities stretch. As the fleet moved further away, retreating into the vast emptiness of space, the silence was broken by the voice of the AI that had guarded the ship for so long. The words reverberated across the ship's hull, echoing through every command center and every ship within the Coalition fleet. Humanity may have been forgotten by the stars, but they will never be forgotten again. The message was clear, and it left an indelible mark on the minds of the alien leaders. They had been given a gift, one of awe, of warning, and most importantly, of respect. The ship they had come to claim, which had once been seen as little more than a relic, was humanity's testament to its strength, ingenuity, and resilience. The AI's message was not just a reminder, it was a declaration, a statement of undeniable truth. Humanity may have been lost in the annals of history, its name faded from the stars, but the galaxy would not forget them again. They had been underestimated, but that was a mistake that would never be made again. Xerxes, still reeling from the events, could not shake the sense of awe and humility that now filled him. The Alliance had been the dominant force in the galaxy for centuries, believing that their advanced technology and superior might make them invincible. Yet, in a single encounter, they had been humbled by a species they had long dismissed as weak. Humanity's true legacy had been hidden for so long, buried beneath the sands of time, and now it was clear that this forgotten race had accomplished feats that rivaled even the greatest civilizations. The ship, a product of human ingenuity and perseverance, had not only survived for eons, but had been a tool for defending a species capable of unimaginable achievement. The realization hit Xerxes harder than any weapon the ship could have unleashed. The very thing that humanity had built to protect itself had become a symbol of something far more important: survival against overwhelming odds, and the drive to never give up, no matter how dire the situation. Set. The Coalition ships disappeared into the cold expanse of space. The commanders and leaders of the Exarath Dominion and their allies were left in a stunned silence. The fear that had been instilled in them during the encounter was not simply from the overwhelming power of the ship, but from the terrifying thought that humanity, once thought to be insignificant, could have even more hidden within it. Their arrogance had led them to believe that their technology, their military prowess, would always guarantee them victory. But this ship, this relic from a forgotten age, had shattered that illusion. Humanity's potential was no longer something to be ignored. It was a force that demanded respect and perhaps even fear. What else had they hidden away? What other inventions, other secrets, lay dormant in the far corners of the galaxy, waiting to be discovered? The retreat of the alien coalition marked the end of a chapter, but it also marked the beginning of a new understanding. The galaxy, once full of complacency and confidence in the superiority of its most powerful empires, would never look at humanity the same way again. What had been dismissed as a primitive race, barely able to fend off invaders from its own planet, had now proven itself to be far more than that. They had built ships that could rival the greatest civilizations, technology that could defend them from the most formidable foes. And most important of all, they had built the kind of legacy that no one, not even the most advanced species, could easily ignore. ASX Syric's fleet disappeared into the stars. A wave of realization swept through the ranks of the alien leaders. They had underestimated humanity in every conceivable way, and now they were forced to face the consequences. The ship, as ancient and worn as it was, had proven to be a powerful reminder of humanity's resilience. The once dismissed human race had created a weapon of such devastating potential that it could not be ignored. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson that day: never underestimate the power of a species that has fought to survive, a species whose ingenuity knows no bounds. The story of that day would echo throughout the stars, carried on the winds of time, a tale of how humanity's legacy, hidden and forgotten for so long, was finally brought to light. The galaxy would remember the message of the AI, and the name of humanity would no longer be lost in the shadows. It would be known, respected, and feared by all who came after. The era of underestimating humanity was over, and a new chapter in the galaxy's history had just begun.